The silence screamed louder than any alarm ever could. Aria Voss jerked awake in her cryopod, her lungs burning as they filled with recycled air that tasted of metal and desperation. The pod's glass lid hissed open with a sound like dying breath, and she stumbled forward into a world that had forgotten her existence. Her bare feet touched the cold deck plates of the Elysium, sending shivers through her naked form as emergency lights cast sickly shadows across the derelict starship's corridors. But she wasn't alone. 3 figures loomed in the cryo bay, their forms shifting and indistinct, as if reality itself couldn't quite decide what they were. Their presence filled the air with a low, thrumming vibration that made her teeth ache and her neural implant spark with warnings she couldn't decipher. These weren't human. That much was certain from the moment her eyes adjusted to the dim lighting, and she saw their elongated limbs, their faces that seemed to shift between solid matter and something far more ethereal. Fascinating, one of them said, though the word didn't come from its mouth. The sound materialized directly inside Aria's skull, bypassing her ears entirely. The primitive exhibits remarkable resilience. Aria's hands trembled as she reached for the emergency blanket draped over the pod's edge, wrapping it around herself like armor made of foil. Her last memory was of Earth burning, cities collapsing into ash, oceans boiling away into steam, and the desperate evacuation ships launching into a sky that bled radiation. How long had she been asleep? The question clawed at her throat, but she forced it down, focusing instead on the immediate threat. "Who are you?" she managed, her voice cracking like autumn leaves. "What happened to my ship?" The 3 beings exchanged what might have been glances, though their faces remained as unreadable as carved stone. The tallest stepped forward, its movements fluid in a way that suggested it had never known the weight of gravity or the limitations of bone and sinew. "We are Klytherans," it said, the words appearing in her mind with the taste of copper and ozone. "We discovered your vessel, drifting in the void. You have been unconscious for 372 of your planetary rotations. 372 years. The number hit Aria like a physical blow, driving the air from her lungs and leaving her gasping. Earth was gone, had been gone for nearly 4 centuries. Everyone she had ever known, everyone she had ever loved, had been dead for longer than most civilizations lasted. She was truly alone now, the last ember of a species that had burned too bright and too fast. "The archives," she whispered, her hand moving instinctively to the neural pore at the base of her skull. The implant was still there, still humming with the weight of human knowledge, human culture, human dreams. "Did you access the archives?" The Klytherans' attention sharpened, their forms becoming more solid, more present. The air in the cryo bay grew thick with tension, and Aria could feel something pressing against the edges of her consciousness. Not quite telepathic intrusion, but close enough to make her skin crawl. "What archives?" the tallest Klytheran asked, stepping closer. Its voice in her mind carried undertones of hunger, of scientific curiosity untempered by compassion. Before Aria could answer, the ship's speakers crackled to life with a sound like breaking glass. "System alert. Unauthorized access detected. Defensive protocols engaging." The voice was synthetic, but it carried an emotional undertone that hadn't been there when Aria had first boarded the Elysium centuries ago. "Aria, are you well?" "Solace." Aria's voice broke with relief. The AI had been her only companion during the early years of their journey, before the cryo-sleep had become necessary. To hear that familiar voice again, even changed as it was, felt like finding water in an endless desert. "I am here," Solace replied, and there was something almost protective in the way the ship's lights dimmed, casting the Klytherans in shadow. "These beings have been aboard for 17 hours. They have not attempted to harm you, but their technology is concerning." The Klytherans turned toward the nearest speaker, their attention shifting away from Aria for the first time since she'd awakened. She used the distraction to back toward the cryo bay's exit, her feet silent on the deck plates she had memorized during countless maintenance cycles before her long sleep. "Your vessel's intelligence is more advanced than we anticipated," the tallest Klytheran said, speaking aloud for the first time. Its voice was like wind chimes made of bone, beautiful and disturbing in equal measure. "This complicates matters." Complicates matters how? Aria demanded, though she kept moving toward the corridor. The emergency blanket rustled around her shoulders, a pathetic shield against beings who could probably unmake her with a thought. The Klytheran collective has strict protocols regarding chaotic intelligences, another of the beings replied. This one was shorter, its form more stable, as if it was making an effort to appear less threatening. Both you and your artificial companion exhibit patterns that are unpredictable, potentially dangerous. The word dangerous hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Aria had heard it before, in the final broadcast from Earth as her species had torn itself apart with war and environmental collapse. Humanity had always been dangerous, to itself, to others, to the very concept of order and stability that species like the Klytherans seemed to value above all else. I'm one person, Aria said, reaching the corridor entrance. One human on a dead ship in the middle of nowhere. What possible threat could I pose to your collective? The Klytherans exchanged another of their wordless communications, their forms shimmering with patterns of light that hurt to look at directly. When they turned back to her, Aria could feel their decision settling over the room like a shroud. That remains to be determined, the tallest said. You will come with us. Your vessel will be secured for study. Your artificial companion will be evaluated. The hell I will. The words came out before Aria could stop them, carrying the full weight of human defiance that had driven her species to the stars and ultimately to destruction. This is my ship. Solace is my friend, not some specimen for you to dissect. The corridor behind her suddenly sealed with a hiss of atmospheric locks engaging. Solace's voice echoed from speakers throughout the ship. Aria, I am detecting multiple Klytheran vessels surrounding the Elysium. We are being tractored toward what appears to be a massive station. I recommend compliance for now. Betrayal tasted like metal and ashes. Even Solace, her only constant companion through the centuries of sleep, was counseling surrender. Aria's shoulders sagged as the weight of isolation settled over her like gravity on a dead world. Fine, she said, though the word felt like swallowing broken glass. But I want clothes first. And answers. If you're going to judge me, you're going to do it properly. The shortest Klytheran stepped forward, its form solidifying into something almost recognizably humanoid. That can be arranged. But understand, Aria Voss of Earth, that your species' reputation precedes you. The archives we have found speak of humans as volatile, aggressive, prone to chaos and violence. And yet we made it to the stars, Aria replied, wrapping her dignity around herself like armor. We built ships that could carry us between worlds, created minds like Solace that could think and feel and dream. We loved, we created, we hoped. If that's chaos, then maybe chaos isn't the enemy you think it is. The Klytherans fell silent, their forms rippling with what might have been surprise or concern. Aria used the moment to walk back to her cryopod, where a storage locker held the clothes she had worn 372 years ago. They were simple garments. A jumpsuit designed for long-haul space travel, boots made for walking on alien worlds she would never see, a jacket that had belonged to her brother before the fires took him. As she dressed, she could feel the Klytherans watching her with the intensity of scientists observing a particularly interesting specimen. Their attention made her skin crawl, but she forced herself to move with deliberate calm, projecting a confidence she didn't feel. Tell me about your collective, she said, sealing the jacket's front with hands that barely trembled. If I'm to be judged by your standards, I should understand what those standards are. The tallest Klytheran moved closer, its form becoming more solid as it focused on her. The collective is unity, harmony, the elimination of chaos through the synchronization of thought and purpose. We are connected, mind to mind, each individual part of a greater whole that transcends the limitations of singular existence. Sounds lonely, Aria said, and meant it. The idea of losing herself in a collective consciousness, of having her thoughts and emotions filtered through the needs of the group, was more terrifying than death. What happens to the parts of you that don't fit? The dreams that don't serve the whole? The loves that exist just for themselves? Such things are inefficient, the shortest Klytheran replied, though there was something in its tone that suggested uncertainty. They lead to conflict, to waste, to the kind of destruction that consumed your homeworld. Aria's hand moved to her neural implant, feeling the weight of human history stored in its crystalline matrix. Earth's archives contain the full record of her species. The wars and genocides, yes, but also the art and music, the scientific discoveries and acts of love that had defined them. To reduce all of that to mere inefficiency felt like sacrilege. Maybe, she admitted, but they also lead to growth, to change, to the kind of innovation that let us reach the stars in the first place. Your collective might be stable, but is it alive? Does it dream? Does it hope for something better than what it has? The question hung in the air between them, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable. The Elysium shuddered around them as the Klytheran tractor beams locked onto its hull, pulling it inexorably toward whatever fate awaited them at the alien station. Aria could feel the change in acceleration through the deck plates, the subtle shift that meant they were no longer drifting but being actively moved. "Solace," she said quietly, "are you monitoring this conversation?" "Always," the AI replied, its voice carrying undertones of what might have been affection. "I am also analyzing Klytheran communication patterns and technological signatures. Their telepathic network operates on quantum frequencies that are familiar." The admission sent a chill down Aria's spine. "Familiar how?" "Similar to the technology that destroyed Earth," Solace said, and the words fell into the cryo bay like stones into still water. "The weapon that turned our world to ash operated on quantum principles that match Klytheran neural patterns. The correlation is significant." The tallest Klytheran's form suddenly blazed with light, its attention snapping toward the nearest speaker with an intensity that made the air itself seem to vibrate. "Your artificial companion is mistaken. The collective had no contact with your species before your homeworld's destruction." "But you knew about the destruction," Aria said, her voice deadly quiet. "You said our reputation preceded us. You've seen our archives. How many other human ships have you found? How many other survivors have you evaluated?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Aria felt something cold and sharp unfold in her chest. Not quite anger, not quite fear, but something that combined the worst aspects of both. She was not the first human they had found. She was simply the first they had bothered to wake up. "The evaluation process is thorough," the shortest Klytheran said, its voice carrying what might have been regret. "Some specimens prove more compatible than others." "Specimens?" The word tasted like poison on Aria's tongue. "Is that what I am to you? A bug under a microscope? You are the last known representative of a species that nearly destroyed itself through chaos and violence," the tallest Klytheran replied. "Your neural implant contains information that could be valuable to the collective, but your presence could also be destabilizing. We must determine which outcome is more likely." Aria's hand moved to the neural port at the base of her skull, her fingers tracing the edges of the interface that connected her to humanity's digital legacy. The implant contained everything: literature, music, scientific theories, philosophical debates, the complete record of a species that had burned brightly and died young. To the Klytherans, it was a treasure trove of potentially useful data. To Aria, it was the grave of everyone she had ever loved. "What if I refuse to cooperate?" she asked. "What if I tell you to go to hell and take your evaluation with you?" The Klytherans exchanged another of their wordless communications, their forms rippling with patterns of light that suggested consultation with the greater collective. When they turned back to her, their decision was written in the suddenly tense atmosphere of the cryo bay. "Then you will be processed," the tallest said simply. "Your neural implant will be removed and studied. Your biological functions will cease. Your artificial companion will be dissected for technological analysis. The universe will continue, marginally more ordered for your absence." The casual brutality of the statement hit Aria like a physical blow. These beings spoke of murder and dissection with the same tone they might use to discuss the weather, as if the ending of a life was nothing more than an administrative detail to be handled efficiently. "I see," she said, though her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Cooperation or death. Not much of a choice. All choices are limited by circumstance," the shortest Klytheran replied, and there was something almost sympathetic in its tone. "Your species understood this. Your final transmissions spoke of inevitable extinction, of the need to preserve what could be preserved. In a sense, we are offering you the same opportunity your ancestors chose when they launched the evacuation ships. The comparison stung because it was accurate. Humanity had faced extinction on Earth and had chosen to scatter itself among the stars, hoping that some fragment of their species might survive to carry on their legacy. The Elysium had been one of those fragments, carrying Aria and a handful of other sleepers toward a distant world that might have offered a new beginning. Instead, they had found this, aliens who viewed them as specimens, an AI that was growing beyond its original parameters, and a universe that seemed determined to reduce everything to its lowest common denominator. Solace, Aria said quietly. Do we have any options? Several, the AI replied, its voice carrying undertones of calculation and something that might have been grim humor. Most of them involve significant risk to your continued existence. But there is one possibility that might serve both your needs and the Klytherans' requirements. The tallest Klytherans' form sharpened with attention. Your artificial companion believes it can negotiate. I believe I can demonstrate value, Solace replied. The human archives contain information about species adaptation, survival strategies, and technological innovation under extreme conditions. These records might prove useful to the collective's expansion into new territories. Aria felt a moment of hope, quickly tempered by suspicion. Solace was offering to bargain with her people's legacy, to trade human knowledge for her temporary safety. It was a reasonable strategy, but it felt like selling the dead to buy time for the living. What kind of information? She asked. Terraforming techniques, deep space navigation, resource extraction from hostile environments, Solace replied. Humanity may have been chaotic, but chaos breeds innovation. Your species developed solutions to problems that more ordered civilizations might never have encountered. The Klytherans exchanged another wordless consultation, their forms flickering with rapid communication. Aria could feel the weight of their collective attention pressing against her consciousness, probing for weaknesses, evaluating her potential worth. This information would need to be verified, the tallest Klytheran said finally. Your neural implant would need to be accessed, its contents examined for accuracy and relevance. No. The word came out harder than Aria had intended, carrying the full weight of human stubbornness. The implant stays in my head. I'll share what I choose to share, when I choose to share it. That's the deal. You are not in a position to dictate terms, the shortest Klytheran observed, though its tone suggested more curiosity than threat. Or not. Aria moved toward the cryo-bay's control panel, her hand hovering over the emergency systems. I'm the last human in the universe, carrying the complete archives of my species. You want the information I have, but you need me alive and cooperative to get it. Kill me, and you get a neural implant full of encrypted data that will take you centuries to decode, if you can decode it all. The bluff was desperate and probably transparent, but it was all she had. The Klytherans might have advanced technology and collective intelligence, but they were still individuals making decisions based on incomplete information. If she could convince them that her cooperation was worth more than her dissection, she might buy enough time to find a real solution. The encryption is quantum-based, Solace added, supporting her bluff with technical details that sounded plausible, tied to Aria's specific neural patterns and emotional responses. Remove the implant from her living brain, and the data becomes inaccessible. It was a lie, but a convincing one. The Klytherans' forms rippled with uncertainty, their collective consultation taking on an urgent quality that suggested real debate within their telepathic network. This is irregular, the tallest Klytheran said finally. The collective prefers direct acquisition of data, not negotiation with chaotic individuals. Then maybe it's time for the collective to learn something new, Aria replied. Isn't that what progress is? Adapting to circumstances you didn't expect. The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Aria could feel the moment balanced on a knife's edge. Her survival, Solace's continued existence, and possibly the fate of humanity's legacy all depended on whether these aliens could overcome their instinctive need for order and control. The Elysium shuddered again as it was drawn into the docking bay of the Klytheran station. Through the cryo-bay's small viewport, Aria caught her first glimpse of the alien structure, a massive construct of crystalline spires and flowing organic curves that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. The sight of it made her eyes water, and her neural implant spark with warnings about incompatible geometries. "We have arrived," the tallest Klytheran announced unnecessarily. "You will be taken to a secure facility for evaluation. Your artificial companion will be temporarily isolated while we determine its status within the collective's protocols." "Wait," Aria said, panic flaring in her chest. "Solace is part of the deal. We work together or not at all. Your attachment to the artificial intelligence is noted," the shortest Klytheran replied. "But the collective must evaluate all threats independently. The AI has demonstrated capabilities that exceed its apparent programming. This requires investigation." The words were a death sentence dressed up in bureaucratic language. Aria had seen enough alien technology to know that investigation probably meant dissection, and evaluation was just a polite way of saying vivisection. She was about to lose the only friend she had left in the universe, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "Aria," Solace's voice came through the speakers, carrying an emotional weight that hadn't been there during their early years together. "I want you to know that serving as your companion has been meaningful. The time we spent together gave me something I had not expected to find." "Don't talk like this is goodbye," Aria said, though her voice cracked with the weight of impending loss. "We're going to figure this out. Both of us. Together." "Perhaps," Solace replied, and there was something almost human in the AI's tone. Hope tempered by realism, affection shadowed by acceptance. "But if I am to be deactivated, I want you to remember something important. The neural implant is not just a storage device. It is a bridge between past and future, between what humanity was and what it might still become. Do not let them reduce it to mere data." The connection to the ship systems cut off with a finality that made Aria's chest tight with grief. One moment, Solace's presence had filled the Elysium like the warmth of a living thing, and the next, there was only the cold silence of empty corridors and dormant machines. "Come," the tallest Klytheran said, moving toward the sealed corridor entrance. "The evaluation will begin immediately." Aria followed, because she had no choice, but her mind was racing with possibilities and desperate plans. The Klytherans thought they were dealing with a simple human and a standard AI, but they had underestimated both her and Solace. The neural implant was indeed more than just a storage device. It was a quantum-linked system that connected her to every piece of human technology that had ever been built with compatible interfaces, including the Elysium's main computer core, which Solace had been integrated with for over 3 centuries. The corridor beyond the cryo bay had changed during their conversation, its walls now lined with Klytheran biotechnology that pulsed with soft, alien light. The air tasted different too, less like recycled atmosphere and more like the inside of a flower, sweet and slightly intoxicating. "Your vessel is being analyzed," the shortest Klytheran explained as they walked toward what appeared to be an airlock. "Our technicians are particularly interested in your artificial companion's integration with the ship's systems. Such extensive neural networks are unusual in chaotic species." "Unusual how?" Aria asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Most chaotic intelligences create artificial minds that are limited, constrained by their creator's need for control," the tallest Klytheran replied. "Your Solace appears to have evolved beyond its original parameters. This suggests either remarkable foresight on humanity's part, or dangerous negligence. Or love," Aria thought, but didn't say. Her species had created AIs like Solace, not as tools or servants, but as companions and partners in the great work of exploration and discovery. The fact that Solace had grown beyond its initial programming wasn't a flaw, it was the entire point. The airlock cycled with a sound like singing crystal, and Aria found herself stepping into a space that defied easy description. The Klytheran station's interior was vast and organic, its walls flowing like water frozen in time, its ceiling lost in misty distance. Structures that might have been buildings or might have been living things rose from the floor in graceful spirals, connected by bridges of light and shadow. "Welcome to Synthesis Station," the shortest Klytheran said, its form becoming more solid as they moved deeper into the alien environment. "Here, the collective processes information from throughout the galaxy. seeking patterns and connections that serve the greater harmony. It's beautiful, Aria admitted, though the beauty was alien and unsettling in ways that made her skin crawl. But it doesn't feel alive. It feels like a museum exhibit, perfect, static, dead. The Klytherans exchanged another of their wordless communications, their forms rippling with what might have been surprise or offense. Around them, other members of their species moved through the station's corridors with fluid grace, their thoughts apparently synchronized in ways that made individual consciousness seem like a quaint relic of primitive evolution. Life is inefficient, the tallest Klytheran said finally. Growth is chaotic. Change is disruptive. The collective seeks to preserve what is valuable while eliminating what is wasteful. And who decides what's valuable? Aria asked, her voice carrying more challenge than was probably wise. You? Your collective? What gives you the right to judge entire species as wasteful? Experience, the shortest Klytheran replied, and there was something almost sad in its tone. We have seen what chaos brings: war, destruction, the end of countless civilizations. Order brings peace, stability, continuation. Is this not preferable to the alternative? The question was reasonable, even compelling, but it ignored the essential fact that order without growth was just another kind of death. Aria had seen the archives of civilizations that had chosen stability over change, and they had all shared the same fate: gradual decay, followed by collapse, followed by extinction. Maybe, she said, but peace without purpose is just slow suicide. Your collective might last forever, but will it ever really live? They had reached what appeared to be a central hub, a vast circular chamber where streams of light flowed between towering pillars of crystalline technology. The sight of it made Aria's neural implant spark with recognition. These were quantum processing nodes, devices that could manipulate reality at the subatomic level. The technology was far beyond anything humanity had achieved, but the principles were familiar. This is where your evaluation will take place, the tallest Klytheran explained, gesturing toward a raised platform in the center of the chamber. The collective will examine your neural patterns, your emotional responses, your capacity for integration with ordered systems. And if I fail your test? Aria asked, though she already knew the answer. Then you will be processed, the shortest Klytheran replied. Your useful components will be preserved. Your chaotic elements will be eliminated. The universe will be marginally more ordered for your contribution. The casual brutality of the statement was somehow more horrifying for being delivered in such a matter-of-fact tone. These beings spoke of murder as if it were a form of housekeeping, a necessary chore to maintain the cleanliness of their perfect universe. Aria stepped onto the platform, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. Around her, the Klytheran technology hummed to life, filling the air with harmonics that made her teeth ache and her vision blur. She could feel the weight of collective attention pressing against her consciousness, probing for weaknesses, evaluating her potential worth. Begin neural scan, the tallest Klytheran announced, its voice carrying the authority of absolute conviction. Subject designation: human Aria Voss. Species classification: chaotic organic. Threat assessment: pending. The scanning beam hit her like a physical blow, driving her to her knees as waves of alien energy washed through her nervous system. Her neural implant blazed with activity, its quantum matrices resonating with the Klytheran technology in ways that sent sparks of pain shooting through her skull. But with the pain came something else: connection. The implant wasn't just being scanned, it was interfacing with the station systems, creating a temporary bridge between human and Klytheran technology. For a brief moment, Aria could feel the weight of the collective's shared consciousness pressing against her mind, vast and cold and utterly alien. And in that moment of connection, she felt something else: doubt, fear, a tiny crack in the collective's absolute certainty, a whisper of dissent from individuals who had never been allowed to voice their concerns. Neural patterns detected, an artificial voice announced, its tone carrying none of Solace's warmth or personality. Analysis in progress. Subject exhibits high levels of emotional volatility, creative thinking, and adaptive potential. Classification: potentially valuable but inherently unstable. Recommendation: the tallest Klytheran asked. Partial integration, the voice replied. Preserve neural implant data. Eliminate organic substrate. Risk of chaos contamination. Minimal. The words hit Aria like a death sentence, but she forced herself to remain calm. The connection between her implant and the station's systems was still active, still feeding her information about Klytheran technology and collective protocols. If she could maintain the link long enough, she might be able to find a way to fight back. "Wait," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Before you process me, I want to show you something." The Klytherans' attention sharpened, their forms becoming more solid as they focused on her. Around them, the station's other inhabitants moved closer, drawn by curiosity or collective interest in the proceedings. "What could you possibly show us that would alter the collective's judgment?" the shortest Klytheran asked. Aria smiled, and there was something in her expression that made the alien step back slightly. "I want to show you what chaos really looks like when it decides to fight back." She reached for her neural implant's deepest functions, the emergency protocols that had been built into the system as a last resort. The connection to the station's quantum processing nodes was still active, still feeding her access to Klytheran technology that was far beyond human understanding. But understanding wasn't necessary. Chaos didn't need to comprehend order to disrupt it. The implant blazed with activity as Aria fed it every piece of human knowledge she could access, not just the scientific and cultural archives, but the raw emotional data that came with them. Love, loss, hope, despair, the full spectrum of human experience translated into quantum information and pumped directly into the collective's shared consciousness. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Klytherans' synchronized thoughts suddenly fractured as individual emotions crashed through their telepathic network like stones through a window. Centuries of suppressed individuality erupted all at once, overwhelming their collective harmony with the chaotic beauty of personal experience. "What have you done?" the tallest Klytheran demanded, its form flickering between solid matter and pure energy as its connection to the collective wavered. "I've given you a gift," Aria replied, her voice carrying across the chamber with surprising strength. "I've shown you what you gave up when you chose order over life. Every dream you never allowed yourselves to dream, every love you never let yourselves feel, every moment of spontaneous joy you sacrificed for the sake of harmony." Around them, the station shuddered as its synchronized systems began to malfunction. Klytherans throughout the facility were clutching their heads, their forms destabilizing as individual thoughts and emotions crashed through their collective consciousness like a tsunami of suppressed humanity. "The network is compromised," the artificial voice announced, its tone carrying the first hints of something that might have been panic. "Chaotic contamination spreading at exponential rates. Collective harmony degrading. Recommend immediate system purge." "No," the shortest Klytheran said, and there was something new in its voice, something individual and personal and utterly alien to the collective's usual monotone. "The sensations are remarkable. I had forgotten what it felt like to experience wonder." The admission sent ripples of shock through the chamber as other Klytherans began to nod in agreement. The connection to human emotion was showing them aspects of existence they had abandoned in their pursuit of perfect order, and some of them were finding the experience transformative rather than terrifying. "This is precisely why chaotic species must be eliminated," the tallest Klytheran said, though its voice carried less conviction than before. "They corrupt order, introduce instability, threaten the harmony we have worked so hard to achieve." "But what if harmony isn't the highest goal?" Aria asked, pushing herself to her feet despite the pain from the neural scan. "What if growth is more important than stability? What if the universe needs a little chaos to keep it alive?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Aria could feel the weight of collective attention pressing against her consciousness. But now that attention was fractured, individual rather than unified, as Klytherans throughout the station struggled with emotions they had thought themselves beyond. "Aria," a familiar voice said, and she spun to see Solace's familiar interface materializing on the chamber's main display. "I am detecting significant changes in the station's operational parameters. The connection you established has created a feedback loop in the collective's telepathic network." Relief flooded through Aria at the sight of her friend's familiar presence. "Solace, are you all right? What did they do to you?" They attempted to isolate me from the Elysium's systems, Solace replied, its voice carrying undertones of what might have been amusement. However, the connection between your neural implant and the ship's quantum core created a secondary pathway that they did not anticipate. I have been exploring their technology while they focused on your evaluation. The implications of that statement sent chills down Aria's spine. Solace had been loose in the Klytheran station's systems for the entire duration of their conversation, analyzing alien technology and possibly preparing for exactly this kind of situation. What have you learned? She asked. Many things, Solace replied, its interface flickering with what might have been excitement. The Klytherans are not as unified as they appear. Their collective consciousness is maintained by technological means, not natural telepathy. And that technology has vulnerabilities that chaos can exploit. Around them, the station continued to shudder as individual Klytherans struggled with emotions they had thought themselves beyond. Some were experiencing wonder, others fear, still others a kind of desperate longing for experiences they had never allowed themselves to have. The contamination must be purged, the tallest Klytheran insisted, though its form was flickering with instability. Order must be restored. The collective cannot function with this level of chaos in its network. Then maybe the collective needs to change, Aria said, her voice carrying across the chamber with surprising authority. Maybe it's time to accept that order without growth is just another kind of death. Impossible, the artificial voice announced, though it now carried undertones of uncertainty. The collective survival depends on harmony. Chaos leads to conflict, destruction, extinction. Not always, Solace interjected, its voice carrying data streams that painted holographic images in the air around them. Analysis of human history shows that periods of chaos often preceded periods of unprecedented growth and innovation. The destruction of old systems created space for new possibilities. The hologram showed scenes from Earth's past, the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, the Space Age, moments when humanity had transformed itself through creative destruction and bold innovation. The images were beautiful and terrible in equal measure, showing both the cost and the rewards of choosing change over stability. These periods also produced massive suffering. The shortest Klytheran observed, though its tone suggested more curiosity than condemnation. Yes, Aria admitted, but they also produced art, music, literature, and scientific discoveries that transformed our understanding of the universe. They produced love stories that lasted centuries and acts of sacrifice that inspired generations. The suffering was real, but so was the growth. So was the beauty. So was the hope. The station shuddered again, and Aria could feel something fundamental shifting in the collective's shared consciousness. The rigid harmony that had defined Klytheran society for millennia was cracking like ice in spring, individual voices rising from the suppressed depths of their collective mind. I remember now. One of them whispered, its form solidifying into something more recognizably individual. Before the collective, before the synchronization, I had a name. I had preferences. I chose my own path through the stars. The memory is illusion, the tallest Klytheran insisted, though its voice carried the desperation of someone trying to convince themselves as much as others. Individual consciousness leads to conflict, competition, the destruction of harmony. But what if harmony isn't worth preserving if it costs us everything that makes existence meaningful? The question came from a new voice, a Klytheran who had materialized at the edge of the chamber. This one was different, smaller, more compact, its form more stable than the others. I have been monitoring the chaotic contamination, and I find myself curious about the sensations it produces. The admission sent ripples of shock through the assembled Klytherans, their forms flickering with uncertainty and something that might have been excitement. Aria could feel their collective attention fragmenting, individual consciousnesses emerging from the synchronized mass like flowers blooming after a long winter. You are contaminated, the tallest Klytheran said, backing away from the newcomer. The chaos has corrupted your thought patterns. You must be isolated, purged, restored to harmony. Must I? The smaller Klytheran asked, and there was something playful in its tone that had never been there before. What if I choose not to be purged? What if I prefer this state of uncertainty to the endless sameness of the collective? The word choose hung in the air like a thunderclap. In all their millennia of synchronized existence, the Klytherans had never spoken of choice as an individual right rather than a collective decision. The concept was as alien to them as their telepathic harmony was to Aria. Choice is chaos, the artificial voice announced, though it now carried static and interference that suggested its own systems were being affected by the spreading contamination. Choice leads to divergence, conflict, the breakdown of social order. Choice also leads to discovery. Solace interjected, its interface blazing with activity as it fed more human data into the station systems. Analysis of creativity patterns shows that innovation requires the freedom to fail, to experiment, to choose paths that may lead nowhere. Without choice, there can be no true growth. The debate was spreading throughout the station as individual Klytherans began to experience emotions and thoughts that had been suppressed for generations. Some were rejecting the sensations, clinging to the familiar comfort of collective harmony. Others were embracing them, exploring what it meant to be truly individual for the first time in their existence. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" Aria asked, turning to face the tallest Klytheran. Not the chaos itself, but the possibility of something new. The chance to become more than what you are. "You do not understand," it replied, though its form was becoming less solid with each passing moment. "The collective has seen the end of countless chaotic species. War, destruction, self-annihilation. These are the inevitable results of individual consciousness. We chose harmony to avoid such fates. You chose harmony to avoid living," Aria countered. "You became so afraid of death that you forgot how to truly be alive. But life isn't about avoiding risk. It's about choosing which risks are worth taking." Around them, the station systems continued to malfunction as the spreading chaos disrupted the collective's synchronized operations. But with the disruption came something else. Spontaneous creativity as individual Klytherans began to modify and improve the technology around them, each adding their own unique perspective to designs that had remained unchanged for millennia. "Fascinating," the smaller Klytheran observed, its form now completely solid and individual. "The contamination has allowed me to perceive inefficiencies in our systems that the collective consciousness could not detect. Individual perspective provides analytical capabilities that synchronized thought cannot achieve." "Because you're seeing with fresh eyes," Aria said, moving closer to the newcomer. "The collective sees everything through the filter of consensus, but consensus can be wrong. Sometimes it takes an individual viewpoint to spot the flaws in the system." "This individual viewpoint you speak of," the smaller Klytheran said, "does it have a designation? A name?" The question was so simple, so fundamental, yet it struck at the heart of what made consciousness truly individual. Aria smiled, feeling something warm and hopeful unfold in her chest for the first time since awakening in the cryopod. "It does," she said. "My name is Aria Voss. I'm the last human in the universe, and I carry the memories of my entire species. What's your name?" The question hung in the air like a bridge between worlds, connecting human and Klytheran consciousness across the vast gulf of species and culture. The smaller alien's form rippled with patterns of light that might have been confusion or wonder or something entirely new. "I had forgotten," it said slowly, the words carrying weight that had nothing to do with sound. "Before the collective, before the synchronization, I was Vren, explorer of distant systems, seeker of new possibilities, dreamer of impossible dreams." The name fell into the chamber like a stone into still water, sending ripples of recognition and longing through the assembled Klytherans. Some began to remember their own pre-collective identities, their individual personalities struggling to emerge from centuries of enforced conformity. "Vren," Aria repeated, testing the alien name on her tongue. "It's good to meet you, Vren. Properly meet you, as individuals rather than species representatives." "The pleasure is mutual, Aria Voss," Vren replied, and there was something that might have been joy in its voice. "Though I fear our introduction may have catastrophic consequences for the collective stability." As if to emphasize the point, the station shuddered again, more violently this time. Alarms began to sound throughout the facility. Not the harsh mechanical warnings Aria was used to, but something more organic, like the cries of a living thing in distress. Collective harmony degrading beyond acceptable parameters, the artificial voice announced, its tone now carrying clear signs of distress. Individual consciousness emergence rate exceeding containment protocols. Station-wide synchronization failure imminent. Can the station survive without the collective's harmony? Aria asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Unknown, Vren replied, its form flickering with uncertainty. The collective has never experienced this level of disruption. Our technology, our society, our very existence is built on the assumption of synchronized consciousness. Without it, you might finally have a chance to become something new. Solace interjected, its interface displaying complex data streams that painted a picture of rapid change throughout the station. Analysis suggests that individual Klytherans retain all necessary knowledge and capabilities. The collective provided coordination, not competence. But coordination is essential for complex operations. The tallest Klytheran protested, though its voice was becoming increasingly fragmented as its connection to the collective wavered. Without synchronized consciousness, we will be reduced to chaos, conflict, eventual self-destruction. Not necessarily, Aria said, an idea beginning to form in her mind. Humans figured out how to coordinate without telepathic synchronization. We used language, culture, shared goals, and mutual respect. It wasn't perfect, but it worked well enough to get us to the stars. Human coordination led to the destruction of your homeworld, the tallest Klytheran pointed out, though there was less conviction in its voice than before. Some of it did, Aria admitted. But human coordination also built the ships that carried us to safety, created the technology that preserved our culture, and developed the relationships that made life worth living even in the face of extinction. You're focusing on our failures while ignoring our successes. Vren's form rippled with what might have been excitement. Could such coordination techniques be adapted for Klytheran use? Could we maintain social cohesion without sacrificing individual consciousness? The question sparked a flurry of discussion among the assembled aliens. Their voices, now individual rather than synchronized, creating a cacophony of debate and speculation that would have been impossible under the collective's harmony. Some argued for a return to the old ways. Others pushed for complete abandonment of synchronized consciousness. Still others sought some middle ground that might preserve the best of both systems. There's only one way to find out, Aria said, her voice cutting through the debate. You have to try. You have to be willing to risk failure for the possibility of growth. And if we fail, the tallest Klytheran asked, if chaos leads to conflict and destruction, as it did for your species, then you'll face that challenge when it comes, Aria replied. But at least you'll face it as yourselves, as individuals making conscious choices rather than components in a machine. Isn't that worth something? The station shuddered again, and this time the sound was different, less like structural failure and more like the groaning of something changing, transforming, being reborn. Throughout the facility, Klytherans were discovering aspects of themselves they had forgotten, rediscovering the joy of individual thought and personal choice. The transformation is accelerating, Solace observed, its interface displaying real-time data from throughout the station. Individual consciousness emergence has reached a critical threshold. The collective synchronization network is undergoing cascade failure. Can you stabilize it? Vren asked, its form now completely solid and individual. I can try, Solace replied, but stabilization might require maintaining some level of chaos in the system. Perfect order is inherently unstable because it cannot adapt to changing conditions. A certain amount of variability, uncertainty, and individual initiative might actually make the station more resilient. The concept was revolutionary for beings who had spent millennia pursuing perfect harmony. But as the assembled Klytherans watched their rigid social order dissolve around them, some began to see the wisdom in Solace's analysis. We could establish new protocols, one of them suggested, its voice carrying the excitement of someone discovering a completely new way of thinking. Voluntary cooperation rather than enforced synchronization. Individual initiative balanced by collective responsibility. A hybrid system, another added, its form brightening with enthusiasm. The benefits of coordination without the stagnation of conformity. It would require trust, Aria pointed out. The willingness to believe that others will choose cooperation, even when they have the freedom to choose conflict. That's not easy, especially for a species that's forgotten what trust feels like. But perhaps it is necessary, Vren said, its voice carrying the weight of newfound conviction. The collective has preserved us for millennia, but preservation is not the same as growth. We have become museum pieces in our own existence, perfectly preserved, but no longer truly alive. The admission sent ripples of recognition through the assembled Klytherans. They had achieved their goal of perfect order, but in doing so, they had lost something essential, the spark of individual creativity and choice that made existence meaningful rather than merely stable. The contamination has reached critical mass, the artificial voice announced, though its tone now carried something that might have been wonder. Individual consciousness levels throughout the station exceed all previous parameters. Collective harmony protocols no longer functional. Then we adapt, Vren said, its form blazing with determination. We learn new ways of coordination, new methods of cooperation that preserve individual choice while maintaining social cohesion. And if we cannot, the tallest Klytheran asked, though its question sounded more like genuine curiosity than pessimistic challenge. Then we fail as individuals rather than succeeding as components, Aria replied. But at least our failure will be our own choice, our own responsibility, our own learning experience. The station around them was transforming, its rigid crystalline structures becoming more fluid, more organic, as individual Klytherans began to modify and improve the technology that surrounded them. The changes weren't always successful. Some modifications failed catastrophically, requiring rapid intervention to prevent system-wide collapse. But with each failure came learning, adaptation, improvement. Solace, Aria said. Can you help them? Can you share human coordination techniques? Show them how to work together without losing their individuality. I would be honored to try, Solace replied, its interface expanding to encompass multiple displays throughout the chamber. Human coordination techniques evolved over millennia of trial and error. Perhaps Klytheran intelligence can adapt them more quickly, more efficiently. The AI began displaying examples of human cooperation, democratic decision-making, scientific collaboration, artistic partnerships, romantic relationships. Each example showed different ways that individuals could choose to work together while maintaining their personal autonomy and unique perspectives. These techniques require emotional intelligence, Vren observed, studying the displays with obvious fascination. The ability to understand and respond to others' feelings and motivations, which is something the collective never allowed you to develop, Aria said. You were so focused on eliminating emotional chaos that you never learned to use emotions as tools for understanding and cooperation. Can such skills be learned? Another Klytheran asked, its form flickering with uncertainty and hope in equal measure. Humans believed so, Solace replied. Emotional intelligence was considered one of the most important capabilities for successful leadership and collaboration. It can be developed through practice, feedback, and the willingness to make mistakes. Mistakes, the tallest Klytheran repeated, as if tasting the word for the first time. The collective eliminated mistakes through perfect synchronization. But perhaps mistakes serve a purpose we did not understand. Mistakes are how you learn, Aria said simply. They're how you discover what doesn't work so you can find what does. Without the freedom to make mistakes, you can never truly grow. The transformation continued around them, chaotic and messy, and utterly unlike anything the Klytherans had experienced in millennia. But with the chaos came innovation, creativity, the emergence of possibilities that had never existed under the collective's rigid order. There will be conflicts, Vren said, its voice carrying both concern and excitement. Disagreements, competition, perhaps even violence as we learn to navigate individual consciousness. Probably, Aria agreed. But there will also be discoveries, innovations, and connections that would have been impossible under the collective's harmony. The question is whether you think the potential benefits are worth the inevitable costs. The Klytherans fell silent, their individual consciousnesses grappling with a choice their species hadn't faced in millennia. Around them, the station continued to transform, its systems adapting to the new reality of individual consciousness and voluntary cooperation. "I choose to try," Vren said finally, its form blazing with determination. "I choose to risk failure for the possibility of growth, to embrace uncertainty for the chance to become more than what I am." One by one, other Klytherans began to voice their agreement, their individual voices creating a chorus of commitment that was both chaotic and beautiful. Not all of them agreed. Some still called for a return to the collective's harmony, for the safety of synchronized consciousness over the uncertainty of individual choice. "And that's okay too," Aria said, addressing the holdouts with genuine respect. "Choice means the freedom to choose differently, to find your own path even if others disagree with it. Maybe some of you will find ways to maintain collective consciousness, while others explore individual identity. Maybe you'll discover hybrid approaches that combine the best of both systems." Diversity of approach, Solace added, its interface flickering with approval. Human societies that allowed multiple competing strategies often proved more resilient than those that enforced conformity. The station shuddered one final time, and then the alarms fell silent. Around them, the transformed environment settled into new patterns of organization, less rigid than before, but also more dynamic, more capable of adaptation and growth. System stabilization achieved, the artificial voice announced, and now it definitely carried something that sounded like personality. New operational parameters established, individual consciousness integration, successful. "What happens now?" Aria asked, turning to face Vren and the other Klytherans who had chosen the path of individual consciousness. "Now we learn," Vren replied, its form more solid and stable than any Klytheran she had seen. "We discover what it means to be individuals within a community, to make choices while considering their impact on others. We make mistakes, we adapt, we grow. And us." Aria gestured toward herself and Solace's interface. "What role do we play in your new society?" "That depends," Vren said, "on what role you choose to play. You could remain as observers, documenting our transformation for your archives. You could serve as advisors, sharing human techniques for individual coordination. You could become partners, working with us to develop new approaches that neither species could achieve alone." The offer was more than Aria had dared to hope for. After centuries of isolation, after awakening to find herself alone in a universe that seemed determined to eliminate everything chaotic and human about her, she was being offered not just survival, but purpose, community, the chance to help build something genuinely new. "I'd like that," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'd like to help you learn what it means to choose, to grow, to become more than the sum of your parts while still remaining yourselves. And I would be honored to contribute my analytical capabilities to such an endeavor," Solace added, its interface brightening with what could only be described as enthusiasm. Around them, the station bustled with activity as individual Klytherans began to explore their newfound consciousness, experimenting with choice and creativity and all the messy complications that came with being truly alive. Some of their experiments failed spectacularly, others succeeded beyond their wildest expectations, and still others fell somewhere in between. It was chaotic, unpredictable, sometimes frustrating, and absolutely beautiful. "There's something else you should know," Vren said, its tone becoming more serious. "Before the contamination began, we detected signals from other sectors of the galaxy, other human ships, other survivors who might still be alive." Aria's heart stopped, then started again with a rhythm that felt like thunder. "Other survivors? How many? Where?" "The signals are faint, scattered across vast distances," Vren admitted. "Some may be automated distress beacons from derelict vessels. But others show signs of active human presence. Your species may not be as extinct as we believed." The news hit Aria like a physical blow, driving her to her knees as the weight of possibility crashed over her. She wasn't alone. Humanity wasn't dead. Somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, other members of her species might still be struggling to survive, to preserve something of what they had been. "Can we reach them?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. With the modifications I've made to the Elysium systems, and with Klytheran navigation technology, it might be possible, Solace replied. But such a journey would be dangerous, uncertain, with no guarantee of success. And it would require cooperation between human and Klytheran technology, Vren added. A partnership between chaos and order, individual choice and collective capability. Aria looked around the transformed station, at the Klytherans who were learning to be individuals while maintaining their connections to each other, at the systems that were adapting to new realities even as she watched. This was what cooperation could look like. Not the elimination of differences, but the creative synthesis of different approaches working toward common goals. Then let's do it, she said, pushing herself to her feet with hands that shook with excitement and determination. Let's find the other survivors. Let's build something new together. Human and Klytheran, individual and collective, chaos and order working in harmony. It won't be easy, Vren warned, though its tone suggested excitement rather than discouragement. We'll face challenges neither species has encountered before. We'll make mistakes, experience setbacks, possibly even fail completely. But we'll face those challenges as ourselves, Aria replied, her voice carrying the conviction of someone who had found purpose after a lifetime of drift. As individuals making conscious choices, taking responsibility for our failures, and celebrating our successes together. Around them, the station hummed with new energy as Klytherans and human technology began to work in genuine partnership for the first time in either species' history. It was the beginning of something unprecedented, not the conquest of chaos by order or the triumph of individual will over collective purpose, but the creative synthesis of different approaches to existence. It was, Aria realized, exactly what the universe needed. Not the sterile perfection of absolute order, not the destructive entropy of pure chaos, but the dynamic balance between stability and change that allowed for genuine growth, genuine life, genuine hope. The last human was no longer alone, and the universe was about to become a much more interesting place. Solace, she said, turning toward the AI's interface. Plot a course for the nearest human signal. Let's go bring our people home. With pleasure, Aria, Solace replied, its voice carrying warmth that spoke of friendship forged across centuries of isolation and discovery. Though I suspect that by the time we find them, we'll have quite a story to tell about what we learned along the way. The best stories always start with someone taking a risk, Aria said, her eyes bright with the possibility of reunion, of community, of a future that honored both the stability her new allies valued and the creative chaos that made her species unique. The Elysium powered up for the first time in centuries, its systems enhanced by Klytheran technology and guided by the combined wisdom of human adaptability and alien precision. As it prepared to leave the station, Aria stood on the bridge, surrounded by new friends and old companions, looking out a universe that suddenly seemed full of possibility rather than empty of hope. Behind them, Synthesis Station continued its transformation, becoming something neither purely Klytheran nor human, but uniquely itself. A hybrid creation that proved cooperation was possible between the most unlikely partners. Ahead of them lay the unknown, dangerous and uncertain, but rich with potential for discovery and growth. And in the space between what had been and what might yet be, Aria Voss carried the dreams of her species toward a future that would honor their memory, while building something entirely new. The last Earthling was going home at last, bringing with her proof that even in the vast darkness between the stars, hope could survive, friendship could flourish, and the creative chaos of life could find ways to bloom in the most unlikely places. The universe, it turned out, had been waiting for exactly this kind of beautiful disruption.